Why is Prince William's return so important? What's the one thing that's got eyebrows raised over Meghan Markle's new show? And could a small move by Prince Harry have a bigger impact than people realise? Our royal experts will answer all those questions and lots more. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and joining me to discuss all the big talking points is the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English, the Mail on Sunday's editor at Large Charlotte Griffiths, and the Mail's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you all. Now, a reminder just quickly to all of our viewers that if you like great royal updates every week, then make sure you press that subscribe button and never miss another episode. Rebecca, coming to you. I've missed you.
I know, I've missed being here, all of you,
Back
actually.
after your holiday.
Yeah.
An outrageous 2-week break.
I know, I couldn't believe it. I covered church with the King on Easter Sunday and then just vanished.
Oh, you're so glamorous. Well, it is great to have you back. First, let's talk about the latest report into some court costs that Prince Harry is apparently going to have to pay.
He was back at the High Court, and this is obviously his very long-running...
He loves it there.
He does. Long-running battle with the Home Office over their decision to strip him of his official police protection when he quit royal duties and also quit the UK. He was told by a judge that he had comprehensively lost his case, and as a result, the judge was going to award costs, the other side's costs against him. So he's now got to pay 90% of the Home Office costs, which is effectively refunding the taxpayers, because that's where their money comes from. The judge also made very clear that he was not going to allow him to go to the Court of Appeal over this because his loss was so comprehensive. But immediately Harry's lawyers said no, they would kind of circumvent that by going to the Court of Appeal independently. And
well, if that wasn't all savage enough, he has apparently had to issue an apology, is that right?
It was kind of buried away in the court document, but it made clear the court was aware that Harry had sent confidential documents to a British MP he is particularly close to, as well as another member of his own legal team who wasn't part of the circle of trust involving this particular case. And the court, it was spotted, and he's had to apologise for doing that.
Wow. Well, Richard, more Harry. He's also made a video appearance this week in a role that has raised eyebrows in the past.
Yes, this was the general meeting of Travelyst, the eco-tourism firm which Harry set up.
Oh yes, remember Travelyst?
Well, he saved one airfare because he didn't fly to the south of France where this general meeting was taking place. He recorded a video message. But this is the organisation which is always controversial because Harry, on the one hand, loves flying private jets, whether it's to a pop concert in Las Vegas or it's to a holiday in the Caribbean. But then he's a boss of this firm or chairman of this firm which encourages other people to be very eco-conscious. And the speech he gave on this video message was quite strange, really. It was the usual sort of, when you actually analyse what he said, he didn't say much. It was about how destinations have to be more environmentally aware or something, but it just seemed to be kind of meaningless verbiage, frankly.
What sort of thing? Can you remember what he said?
He said if we didn't have communities, we wouldn't have destinations, and if we didn't have destinations, we wouldn't have anywhere to travel to. So in other words, if there wasn't a destination, there would be no travel.
So deep, right?
I mean, yeah. But I have to say, I thought it was really lacklustre, this video. He was clearly reading off some sort of auto cue he'd made for himself on his laptop. You could see that. You could see his eyes tracking it. He changed halfway through, it cut out, and then he came back with a different outfit on. He looked like he'd just been outside sunbathing and just come in. He just looked a bit sort of, A, a bit sunburned, and B, just sort of casual. It just felt lacklustre. And he's supposed to be quite an important part of Travelyst, although he stepped back a little bit lately.
Remember that Prince Harry doesn't take drugs anymore. That's important to say. It's past his drug use. So he was sober and full of beans during
I
the
didn't think he was.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'd also like to point out there's nothing wrong with auto cue.
There's nothing wrong with
it. Quite useful.
But it just seemed like it was heavily scripted. It didn't say anything. It just seemed like he was busy. He quickly flipped up his laptop, said a few things, and beamed it over to this company.
I think you're right, Charlotte. It did feel like he was going through the motions a bit, didn't it?
Yeah,
and
that's a good way of putting it.
I know with Travelyst, I remember covering the launch of Travelyst when he launched it. And actually, it's a good idea. It's basically saying let's get all together, all the kind of interested parties in the travel industry and try and make travel a bit more environmentally friendly. So I get that point. But he gave a speech when he launched it saying I think from memory it was like 90% of my flights are commercial flights. So me being a journalist calculated his flights and worked out actually 90% of his flights were private jet flights.
Yeah, that makes much more sense.
This was after a lot of visits to the south of France and things like that. And I remember his team going apoplectic at me, demanding I don't run this story. And I was like, no, I'm absolutely running the story because what he's saying isn't true.
No wonder he won't talk to you anymore.
Maybe that is why because he's slightly working less for Travelyst than he used to.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why, because he wants to keep travelling private, and so he can't work as closely with Travelyst.
Well, that's very cynical of you. But it is true, isn't it, Charlotte? Like between things like this, the speech for Travelyst and the work concerning media disinformation or social media disinformation during the US elections, he wants to use his voice.
He wants to use his voice, but the question is, should he be? I mean, especially in the run-up to the US election. So he's not an American citizen, as we know, because we've got this whole sort of debate going on about his passport and things like that. And but he is kind of pledging through the Aspen Institute to get involved in stopping the spread of disinformation before the US election, which is a very noble aim. But he is a British, admittedly non-working royal, so I just don't think it's his place to get involved in disinformation. Plus, he's the biggest spreader of misinformation there is, if you count the recollections may vary era of his life, where people say he wasn't quite right about some of those things he said about the royal family. And the big joke on the internet is that he's the disinformant when it comes to the royal family.
Oh dear.
Bit controversial.
Well, indeed. And we will have more on some Netflix and jam controversies coming out of Montecito in a few minutes. But before that, some news about William and the King and Queen. Rebecca, let's start in Scotland with the King and Queen. What is their news?
Well, they're in Scotland for a start. They came back down to London briefly to do a number of engagements. The King obviously got given the banknotes with his face on them, and Camilla did a really great engagement this week where she got young children who are keen to get schools involved in promoting healthy relationships, not toxic relationships, and highlighting the fact that young people are often also victims of domestic abuse between their parents and partners. But they've now gone back up to Burke Hall for another week or so, I would say, for some more kind of Easter downtime. We'll see Camilla a little bit, but I think this is a kind of prelude to what will be, as it's been explained to me, an incredibly busy May and June for them. Gosh. And all of that, I think, bears quite a positive suggestion that the King's cancer treatment is going well, and I think we are very much likely to see him a lot more in May and June.
Well, that is great to hear, but also a lot of people will be really pleased to see Prince William, who is out and about today for the first time since Catherine's diagnosis was announced. What's he doing?
Yeah, so he's highlighting food waste and the importance of trying to cut food waste. There's a great links with his Earthshot Prize as well. This is one of their ideas of reducing emissions and landfill. So he's at a charity that deals with, I think it's 3 tonnes of surplus food waste a day that comes from companies, shops, restaurants, and they work out ways to redistribute it to kind of community organisations, food banks, charities. He's arrived, is raring to go. I can tell you now, because obviously the programme will come out after the engagement's finished, but he will be accompanying some deliveries today. He's brought some of his own produce from his own kitchen to donate, and he was asked on arrival by a couple of people how his wife was doing, and they've given him cards for Catherine, and he said, look, thank you, that's really kind.
Oh, now, Richard, how significant do you think this public engagement is for William and for the public?
Well, I think, it's great to see him back again. I think every engagement now for him is significant. I mean, let's face it, we're going to have to get used to seeing him on his own, aren't we? He'll be missing Catherine by his side. Obviously, they always used to have some engagements together and others solo. But I think what will be difficult is at every engagement, he's going to be asked, how is Catherine?
Yes.
And I'm sure, they've already said they don't want to give kind of running updates. So I suspect we'll hear a lot of, oh, she's fine, thank you, or whatever.
Yeah.
We won't hear too much on that front, and that's understandable.
It comes from a good place, though, doesn't it? Because people genuinely are very fond of her and have been very worried about what she's going through.
And people will want to know, yes.
He might want to prepare a handful of answers.
Well,
that gives us a little bit.
You prompted my question. Surely they must have done that. They must be doing that with William at the palace.
So far it doesn't sound like they have. But the event's not over yet, is it? So.
No, but they do. I mean, look, they won't. People are not set up to ask questions, but obviously you do with your team run through, if someone was to say this, what will your answer be? What would you like to say? So I'm sure that is going on behind the scenes, because he'll want to reassure people, but they've made very clear they want to keep this private, so they don't want to give away more than they're prepared to give.
And do we know yet what the indication is about when Catherine might return to public-facing stuff?
No, we don't. I mean, even with William, I have to say, I would say, although it's a big return to public duty today, I still think we're only going to see him in public maybe once or twice a week. It'll be a kind of replication of what we've seen in February and March, because of course she's still undergoing this preventative chemotherapy, and the whole point was he wanted to be there to support her and his their family. So I think it will be slowly for him. And I've been told she might dip into things. You might, I think, hear the odd message, or possibly even a kind of video contribution or an audio contribution to something, but I wouldn't expect to see in public for a while.
Well, we know that many of you, say probably all of you, are fans of the Waleses, and if you are, you will want to stick around until later in the show when we have a very special montage for you. To the King again now, Rebecca, and the house that our monarch bought for the late Queen's dresser, Angela Kelly, has been revealed. What can you tell us, and tell us why it is so important?
There's a good little scoop in the Mail on Sunday, Daily Mail's sister newspaper, showing this kind of house in the countryside for the first time. We all knew the King had bought this provided it for Angela Kelly for the rest of her natural life to live in, but it's the first time we've seen it, because obviously she had a beautiful beautiful house at the Windsor estate that she lived in when she was working for Queen Elizabeth, which she had to pretty unceremoniously leave after her employment ended following the Queen's death. And obviously it does come with a caveat, because the Queen Elizabeth had very unusually given her permission to write a series of 3 books about their working relationship. One of those books was yet to be written, and my understanding is the proviso of being given a grace and favour home for the rest of her life will mean that 3rd book does never come out.
Is that unusual for that sort of arrangement, to have that sort of string attached?
I think it is quite unusual, but the Angela Kelly case is quite unusual because he knows, the King, that she was due to write this book and was very much intending to. And the other thing I was hearing about a year ago on the circuit was that she was planning to do cruises and talk about her time with the royals. Oh, who knows, it could have been any number of things, but she was basically a big risk factor to the King because she had this incredibly special relationship with the Queen where she had carte blanche to do whatever she wanted pretty much. So that was the unusual case with her, was that she sort of had the permission from the former monarch, and she could have said anything, and she could be cashing in Paul Burrell style, for the rest of her life, unless a stop was put to it all.
So we won't be seeing her on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here then. Like we did.
I tell you what, I'd love to see Angela on that, because I bet she would absolutely,
From what I understand, the brown snakes would be running away screaming.
AK-47 is
so entertaining, more entertaining than Gary Goldsmith.
Yeah.
But the palace, Richard, has been criticised in the past for how it's looked after its staff. But does this show that they will go the extra mile where it's needed?
I think it's always tricky when your job, your house comes with it a lot of the time, and then if that ends suddenly, when your employer dies in this case, then what happens to you? So it's always awkward, and it has been with servants in the past. But yes, this shows that King Charles was obviously keen to look after, and there is good reason to, as they've said. She was extremely close to Queen Elizabeth, and she was a formidable character. What was her nickname? AK-47, I think it was. You know, she didn't take prisoners. So I think if she hadn't been looked after in this way, who knows what?
Don't forget,
who knows what we might have seen.
She was centre of Tiaragate. She was at centre stage for Tiaragate. So she's seen a lot of things go on behind those palace walls, and they probably want to keep that pretty ring-fenced as well, don't they?
Personally, I would love to read her genuine
I'd
memoirs.
love to read the updated version.
I think there would certainly, you know, she was talked about in Prince Harry's book,
Wow.
Spare.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
to hear her response to those claims really would be a bestseller.
Well, Angela Kelly, we're here every Thursday if you ever want to come in for a bit of a chat. There's lots more to come before we move on, but I just want to read a couple of your comments now. We love receiving them. Eva Barron agreed with Richard's suggestion that the Middletons be given a royal title for their support for the family. She wrote, "The Middletons should be given a title. They work hard, support their children and their grandchildren. They are private and just get on with the job to support the future royals." Karen Christopher, meanwhile, was one of a few to disagree with Richard Eden's suggestion that the King explores ways to bring Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie back to work. She wrote no to Beatrice and Eugenie. They don't live in the UK all the time, plus they work. These things should preclude them, as it does Harry and Meghan. T. Randall believes that Harry has lost all his influence now. Harry has fallen too far to ever return to help his family. He has been eliminated from the royal family and he doesn't seem to understand that. Eliminated is a harsh word, isn't it? Harry has a title that no longer means anything to anyone. Tracy B has this to say re Harry's involvement in US affairs. The issue is that he's meddling in policy. He's part of this Aspen Institute. He said our First Amendment is bonkers and they keep banging on about monitoring information they don't like on the internet. It's ludicrous. Sounds a bit like you, Charlotte. Is that your
That's my tweet.
Is that your
I think,
alias?
yeah.
Strong words as ever, and as always, please do keep those comments coming. Well, let's stick with Harry now as I bring back my guest. Richard, you have written about a change in situation to Prince Harry that could have a bigger impact than people realise.
This is really interesting. It relates to the company we were talking about a moment ago, Travelyst, and Prince Harry has updated his details with Companies House in Britain because you have to give your home, your place of residence. And he has finally said that he is now resident in the USA. It's taken him 4 years since they quit Britain. He always said, you know, Britain will always be my home, and it's clearly not now. And, you know, there are all sorts of implications from this. Remember, we've got that case that we've discussed on this programme quite a lot about Harry's immigration status, what he wrote on his forms. It's the subject of a case at the moment with the Heritage Foundation, a think tank that wants to know what did he write. They want to be able to show, you know, what did he say about that past drug use? And then there's other questions about his future roles as well.
Is it, residency doesn't really have any bearing on citizenship, right?
No.
No, so yeah.
But I think what's really interesting is that date he gave was backdated to the day that King Charles threw him out of Frogmore.
This is really pointed. So when he actually said about since when have you been resident in the USA, he made the point that it was that day that my father evicted me from my lovely home in Windsor.
Oh, not that he's keeping score at all.
No.
At all. Now, Rebecca, we also have an update, don't we, about the Netflix projects of the Sussexes. What can you tell us?
Yeah, this made me smile. So it suddenly found itself in the way to some very sympathetic publications that Harry and Meghan were working on 2 big new projects for Netflix. One was a project being curated by Meghan, which I think is quite an interesting choice of words. Doesn't suggest she features in it or, you know, hosts it, but that's about lifestyle, cooking, friendship, all that sort of thing. And the other is a programme about polo and the kind of fast-paced polo world behind the scenes. Then miraculously, a couple of days later, we first of all, I'm sure we'll get on to discuss this, pots of jam associated with Meghan's new business venture start popping up on social media after she sent them to friends and influencers, and they turn up at the Centre Barley fundraising polo match in Florida with a Netflix crew in tow. It's almost as if it was planned. Jo.
No.
Strategy comms.
Yeah, amazing. Now, Richard, what do you think about these Netflix shows? Will they be setting the world on fire, the box office alight?
I think it's fascinating. I mean, remember, there's been rumours for ages that Prince Harry's next project for Netflix would be about Africa. You know, he loves Africa. It's been central to his life. And the idea that's been mooted was for him to return there and make a documentary. Well, that hasn't happened, and it makes you wonder. I can imagine him at the meeting, you know, saying, I want to make a show about Africa, and them saying, wouldn't that be very expensive? You know, would it be great to have a privileged white man going to Africa to give this documentary? So any of that hasn't happened. So what has he been left with? You know, a programme about the poshest sport that there is.
The most privileged white man sport there is.
Is polo. I mean, my goodness, both these projects, you know, we've heard all these rumours about their deal with Netflix is going to come to an end shortly, the end of this year probably. To me, this bears it out in a way, because both projects are very cheap. Netflix has got massive budgets, but instead it's just a cookery programme, you know, filmed at a house in Montecito, and polo, which kind of he does anyway, you know, take along a camera crew.
They've blown their budget on the deal, you know, that £100 million deal with Meghan and Harry.
I mean, what is much more interesting though is Meghan's programme, actually, much more interesting, because from everything I hear, they see it as a chance to recoup some of the money for Netflix, because there are going to be commercial spin-offs from it.
We'll talk about that in a second, but I just want to stay on this polo match for the moment, because Charlotte, there was some controversy, wasn't there, over Harry and Meghan on the polo field that's got a lot of people talking.
Yeah, so Meghan's mask slipped, for sure, and we saw her true colours, I'd say, and I've watched this clip 100 times, because Harry's standing there with his trophy, and a woman comes up and tries to stand next to him. Normal thing, you know, there's lots of people lined up, and Meghan just basically sort of verbally yanks her away from him and places this woman next to her, so she's not next to Harry, and she sort of points several times in this video, and you can see it online, there's a clip of it, and she says, would you like to stand over here? Would you like to stand over here? Over and over again. And it just shows how choreographed all of this is. And of course the Netflix cameras were rolling. But Meghan, I think in her mind, clearly, you know, she's got a very photographic mind, I'm guessing. She was imagining the photos, and she wanted to be the woman next to Harry, clearly. And I just think it just shows these things are very choreographed. And it's not the first time at a polo match that her mask has slipped either, because it happened in 2022 as well. She kept trying to edge her way to the front, holding her hat to the front of the same scene, the polo lineup. And she couldn't quite make her way with her hat underneath all their arms. And it was just, it was choreography nightmare. And it goes to show she's desperate to be front and centre of these things.
And I have to say that this woman who was wanting to stand next to Harry, this wasn't just some beautiful model that's there for a pretty picture. This was actually Dr. Sophie Chanduka, who is the boss of Prince Harry's charity, Centre Barlow.
She has every right to stand next to him then.
So, my goodness, that sort of dismissive tone with her is really cringe-making.
Yes, because she's very bossy. She really points and says, sort of get out of the way, as if she's a lackey.
Dr. Chanduka is a very distinguished character, so it's going to be interesting to see how long she remains in that job.
Well, and it was things that were a little bit more precisely planned was the jam presentation. Well, tell us, who got the jam? This is what I want to know.
Well, exactly, because I suppose, look, I'm not an influencer.
Oh, so you didn't get any jam?
Funny enough, no, but as I think I said before, I do have some of my mum's pickled onions, if anyone would like to share them after the show. They're very good, they're very strong. We have to say, we've got terrible problems with the post in Britain, so I'm sure that those hampers of jam are on their way to us as we speak.
Yes, and it's a preserve, so it will keep, don't worry.
But it actually genuinely intrigues me how this works, because suddenly these pictures started popping up. I think we had 2 on one day, we've now had a third, to a lady who turns out to be the wife of the boss of Paramount. You've got one of Meghan's friends, I think now Mindy Kaling, I don't know if you have to pronounce her, who's quite a big figure in US entertainment, has appeared on Meghan's podcast. Suddenly, all very similarly posed pictures of this artfully arranged pot of jam in a basket of lemons, slightly inexplicably.
With the lid still on.
Yeah, and saying, oh, I love your jam, it's amazing, when clearly it hasn't even been opened. Yeah. That stuff just doesn't
maybe they've had it
for
me. Breakfast before, when she's been making it around,
and all of them is numbered 1 to 50, so there must be a guessing game. So who got number 1? who was number 50? Like, is this a pecking order of how important you are in terms of
I'd be offended if I got number 50 out of
friendship?
50.
I have to say that King Charles might have the last laugh though, because sources at his Highgrove shop in Gloucestershire tell me there's been a real run on his Highgrove strawberry conserves. So what's happened is these sort of loyal royalists, you know, all this talk about Meghan's jam, well, they want to go and buy a pot of King's, the King's Good
and also,
conserve.
Is it mean of me to slightly observe that, you know, Meghan's giving her food to rich influencers and William's out there today giving food to the needy?
Well, there is a point, and he did bring some stuff from his own kitchen to give to them. And of course, Highgrove jam and also Duchy Originals products. All of the Highgrove money from Highgrove produce goes to charity, and the Duchy Original range, which Charles set up many years ago, all of it originally went to charity. Then they did a deal with Waitrose, which profits of it, but a significant proportion of the profits still go to the King's charities. So they're very, very different setups. So because I'm presuming, we haven't been told yet, but I'm presuming not a great portion of the jam money will go to.
We don't know how much this jam costs yet, but Meghan will charge $200 a pop because she thinks so well of herself.
But we must admit, it's been a great publicity stunt.
You know, I want to try the jam. I want to.
I think it's her grandmother's recipe. That's what I heard.
Yeah. What flavour jam is it?
Strawberry.
Strawberry. Lovely.
But that's why people were saying a bit inexplicably in a basket full of lemons. But you know what they say, when life gives you lemons,
gives
you jam.
Now, Charlotte, the other element of Meghan's cooking show is apparently friendship, which has raised a couple of eyebrows, including your male colleague Amanda Platel's, who's been writing about it.
Yeah, Amanda Platel pointed out that there is actually a verb called to be markled in the Urban Dictionary.
Oh dear.
Because she has unfriended so many people she knows, including family members, including Suits co-stars, including her best friend Jessica Mulroney, whose children were page boys at the royal wedding. So for somebody who is actually famous for unfriending her friends or casting aside her friends, it's amazing that she cited the word friendship in this in the blurb for this documentary that's sort of been leaked out. And you know, back to the jam thing, which I know you won't like. Back to the jam thing. The other big joke that's been running all week is, how does she know 50 people to send jam to? Because
that's mean.
This is a woman that doesn't have 50 friends, as far as we can tell.
Well, clearly she does. She's just sent 50 of them jam.
Well,
51, including Rebecca when she gets hers.
Well, it's a bit like the royal wedding guest list. You know, she invited people to that royal wedding of hers that she barely knew. You know, such as Oprah, who was actually just after an interview with her, but she barely knew Oprah at that point. You know, I think she's a bit strategic with her friends, and once she's finished with them, she casts them aside and forgets all about them and deletes their number and blocks their number in some cases.
Gosh, she takes no prisoners, our
She
Charlotte,
takes no prisoners.
Goodness me. Now, Richard, we don't often hear about Princess Margaret on Palace Confidential. I can't remember the last time we discussed her, so what have you been writing about her this week?
This is just a very interesting revelation from Susanna Constantine, who used to be the girlfriend of Princess Margaret's son, David, the Earl of Snowdon. I don't know about you, but I quite enjoy looking at property websites. You know, I love that kind of looking into other people's homes. It's so intriguing. Well, Princess Margaret, it turns out, had a rather more sort of upmarket version of that. So when she was on the tiny island of Mustique, where she had a home, she was friends with the owner of Mustique, and it seems that she would sneak into people's homes when they weren't there. She had access to what was described as virtually a master key, and she would go and have a nosy around. And she went with Susanna to see some of them, including David Bowie's home.
That's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, so she'd go round, she sort of commented on the decor. She said, oh, it's a bit downtown Tokyo. She wasn't too impressed with his decor. But apparently it was quite a regular occurrence.
Is that illegal?
Intrusive?
I don't think it's illegal in the sense that they weren't breaking and entering. She was certainly allowed in by someone who had a key. Because I think all the properties there, you know, there is a sort of ultimate owner.
Yeah.
But anyway, very curious, and it makes me feel less bad about snooping into other people's properties online.
I think that's downright creepy, actually. But anyway, someone we do hear more about on this show is the Princess Royal. Yes, it's the Princess Anne section of the show. It's a regular thing, and this week it's one for our viewers across the pond because Rebecca, she's off to Canada.
Yep, 3rd to the 5th of May, she's off to Canada. We don't know much detail yet about what she's going to be doing, but I think it's worth noting that the Majesties, King and Queen, were due to go to Canada in May and obviously haven't been able to because of his cancer treatment. They hope to reschedule that at a later date. I know it's really important to him, now he is king, to be able to go to all of those realms, and Canada is very much at the top of the list. But I suspect there's an element of trying to make the visit work when it was going to work. And, Princess Anne is very well loved. She will pack in as many engagements as she can. It's only 2 days, she's in her 70s, but that will never let it stop her.
Yet again, thank God for Anne, right?
And she did two, I should point out, she did 2 investitures on Wednesday as well, back-to-back, big investitures at Windsor Castle, standing in for the King. In addition to all the other engagements she does in a week, she's remarkable.
Go, Princess Anne, go! And listen, Prince Louis turns 5 next week, if you can believe that, and to celebrate, here are some beautiful pictures of him that you won't want to miss. I think that gets the prize for one of the cutest montages we've ever done. What do you think?
Oh, he's a sweetie.
He is sweet, isn't he? Well, that's all we have time for today. My thanks to Rebecca, Charlotte, Richard, and to you for watching. We will see you on Palace Confidential next week.